Hello, class. Today we will be going over a lesson titled Justice is Blind Unless You're Broke. Today, our topic is about specifically pedophilia and how the rich are treated versus the poor, or the privileged versus the marginalized, or the powerful versus the powerless. I just want to challenge you with a thought. What is the first thing you think of when you hear pedophile? Like if you're picturing a person, what do you picture first? Me, and after some simple Google searches, they confirmed my thoughts. But my first thought is somebody who's, in gross clothes, like dirty clothes. Looks unwashed, like they've got dirty hair, maybe missing some teeth, just like a gross person. That's kind of what I picture. But why is that first image not somebody who's necessarily rich or somebody in a suit, something like that? Like, why are these standards for somebody who's poor or somebody who's less privileged? What standards do these set for the wealthy, too? Like, does this exclude the wealthy from pedophilia or stuff like that? Just to give you an example, here's an example of a marginalized or less powerful circumstance and the reaction to this circumstance. So, I don't know if you've ever heard of the TV show To Catch a Predator, but they had one, many years of, airtime where there was a lot of people that got a lot of backlash. They ended up having to cancel the show because of a man named Bill Conrad. He suffered so much public humiliation that he actually committed suicide. And there are obvious consequences for these people. Not that Bill Conrad didn't have power, but he doesn't have as much power as some of the other people in these examples. And so he had obvious consequences, and not that these consequences are not supposed to exist for him, but these consequences don't necessarily exist for everyone. And an example of that is these people. I mean, in the news, you've probably seen about Epstein's Island. So far, based off of my research, my citations are there down there at the bottom. Only 2 men have been prosecuted, Epstein and one other guy, for the sexual crimes. Many are going unpunished, and many children continue to be harmed. So, and don't find that justice. So, as we saw before in the last example, there was public humiliation for that man, and he had obvious consequences, which people deserve consequences for these crimes. Not that he should have committed suicide or like that was deserved or anything like that, but he had obvious consequences, and these men have not had obvious consequences, and there's a very obvious power difference between the two. So, like I said, some of the consequences of the rich not being treated the same are people going unpunished. Children continue to be hurt. Like, in some situations, you just, like, somebody has just such a great lawyer, something like that, they just can't be prosecuted, or they always find a way out of something, and children don't get the retribution that they deserve. And this continues to promote an idea of bad behaviors being condoned or bad behaviors being allowed depending on your socioeconomic status. And in our book, we were reading about conflict theory and how this relates to conflict theory is because conflict theory argues that the system benefits the powerful or the rich and takes advantage of the poor or the powerless. And they also talk about how this injustice spreads to the criminal justice system and criminality. And we can see this in these examples because, men aren't being punished, or men and women are not being punished in the way that they should be, because they have so much power. Final thoughts are, again, rich have preference. Rich and powerful have preference. They are treated not the same. They have better circumstances, and the poor suffer due to these consequences. And again, I want to reiterate, not that the poor shouldn't suffer, but the suffering should be the same throughout. So there's just a difference between those two. Again, I do not condone getting away with pedophilia. I'm just pointing out obvious differential, an obvious difference in treatment between the two socioeconomic statuses. And again, these ideas are grained into our mind about, just a Google search and images of people that come up, like stock images of pedophiles, and, what's the first thing you think of? Stuff like that. And children are suffering. I mean, this is really affecting children more than anything, unfortunately. But yes, so I will see you guys in 2 weeks for the next lesson.